all to reflect on the moment we are in and what a moment it is, and where movements for peace and climate justice can go from here. They are with the Climate Mobilization Project, which we're going to learn a little bit about, and they are growing this movement by organizing people into grassroots projects that grow a regenerative economy and culture, expand food, energy and water and land access and sovereignty, and fight back together against the systems that threaten our lives and our communities. Just before I introduce our speakers tonight and hear this cross-movement project that they're working on, because both of them have worked on a number of different social movements, on whether it's on housing or some of these other really important social justice issues, as well as climate. I'm just going to turn this over for a second over to John McDougall, who is the one of the chairs of Mass Peace Action's Peace and Climate Working Group. The Peace and Climate Working Group here at Mass Peace Action is the sponsor of tonight's webinar. So John, want to introduce yourself and tell people just very briefly about this project?
Well, thank you, Paul, and thanks so much to Daisy and Rebecca for joining us. I'm excited too to hear all the exciting things that are going on there. So the Peace and Climate Group at Mass Peace Action is delighted to be the sponsor. And what we recognize in this group is that peace and militarism on the one hand and the climate crisis are very intimately interconnected. For example, obviously climate change in many parts of the world is a direct catalyst for war, whether it's international civil war. And equally, the US military is a gigantic polluter in its own right. Apparently, the US military establishment uses more fossil fuels than 146 different countries. So we're dealing with military pollution, among other things. And thankfully, there are solutions to the climate crisis. Obviously, part of our job is to find solutions to the militarism crisis as well. When it comes to climate, there's obviously mitigation. There's then resilience and adaptation. And then a key part of dealing with all this, obviously, is climate justice. And then finally, on the more positive side, there is peace building, including hopefully lots of collaboration, not only inside countries, but internationally, to deal with the climate crisis which every human on the planet faces. So we have a very small group in the Peace and Climate Group, and we try to do educational work, we do advocacy, mostly involving state issues, but also internationally and federally. And we always welcome new members. And of course, in the age of Zoom, people are most welcome to join us because we meet via Zoom. Most welcome to join us virtually. So I put my email address in the chat, and feel free to contact me if you want to know more about what we're doing. And hopefully that gives you just a quick overview of this particular group. As I say, we're delighted to be the lead sponsor within Mass Peace Action. Back to you, Paul. Thanks.
Thanks very much on that, John. So John's email, if you're interested in considering participating in the Peace and Climate Project, that would be great. So let us begin. Daisy Carter is a native of New Orleans, queer, multidisciplinary artist, yogi, and climate justice organizer, all in one. Daisy is working at the intersections of mutual aid, disaster resiliency, African-American herbalism, and grassroots organizing. Daisy is inspired by the Black radical movements of the so-called US and African diaspora. reimagining what healing and self-determination look like for frontline BIPOC communities who are most vulnerable to climate disaster. In 2021, they founded Rise and Shine, a community-led mutual aid organization building power and solidarity with low-income BIPOC, LGBTQ plus, and other marginalized communities in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and beyond. She has also worked with the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, and with the Sierra Club. We're going to have Daisy begin. Rebecca Harris will follow. Just a little background on Rebecca. She's a resource organizing director and co-leader at Climate Mobilization Project, which is the group really putting on tonight's webinar. Rebecca first began organizing at age 16. I wish I could say that for myself. That was during the movement to end the U.S. wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. After years of organizing for economic justice, housing rights, etc., she joined the Climate Mobilization Project as organizing director, a role in which she coached dozens of local climate groups, launched the campaign for a national climate emergency declaration. Some of us may remember that. And supported the organization in its increasing focus on racial and economic justice and, along the lines that John was talking about, anti-militarism. So you can see that both Daisy and Rebecca have a wealth of experience working across a variety of important issues. So let's see what we can learn from them during this deeply troubled time. So Daisy, would you like to begin?
Yes. Thank you, Paul, for that intro. I was gonna try to say some words myself, but I think that you kind of handled it, brother. Yeah, I wanted to just want to say hi, and also just to open up space and tell people, if you would like to introduce yourself, we want to get to know you in the chat, please feel free to tell us about yourselves, and where you're based, what your pronouns are, etc. if you represent an organization. And also, just if you happen to have any questions as we continue through the program tonight, please feel free to put them in there. Rebecca, do you want to add anything about yourself before we move on?
No, nothing else to add. Just really excited to see where everyone is calling in from and what organizations we're part of. So if folks can share in the chat, that would be amazing. And I can go ahead and kick us off. So it was mentioned during the introductions that we are in a very troubled time. Absolutely. And one of the things that's really important to us at Climate Mobilization Project is to really reckon with the seriousness of the moment that we all are in right now. So for our first interactive activity tonight, we're going to really find ourselves and ground ourselves in this moment when we are at the crossroads of so many different crises. And so we actually have an interactive Google Doc that we are going to use to make together a shared tapestry, a shared understanding of what is going on in the world around us right now, of what is going on in the peace movement. And if we like, we can expand that reflection to other movements as well. I just put the link to that Google Doc in the chat and invite you all to join in there and type your reflections in the document. And we're going to take a couple minutes really to reflect in the document. And as we do that, I see some folks are in the document already. Daisy, would you like me to screen share the document, or are you going to do that? So I can also do that if you prefer. And while we get that pulled up, I can read aloud these questions. If anyone is unable to access the document for any reason, you can also type some of your thoughts, some of your reflections in the chat box. And so the first question that I want to prompt us with is, what feelings and thoughts are coming up for you around the moment that we're in right now? There's so many feelings that may come up as we face climate catastrophe, a constitutional crisis, as we face escalating white supremacy, escalating criminalization, so many other crises. We want to take a second and really lay out those feelings, get them all on the table as we begin this workshop. And I'm going to go ahead and share this document. And then the second question that I invite us to reflect on is, what challenges does the peace movement or other movements face due to the political environment that we're in right now? The third question is, what challenges exist inside the peace movement itself? Right? We know that we face challenges oftentimes from the environment around us, but also from inside our movements, inside our organizations, and the way that they're structured. And then the fourth question is, what sources of strength can we draw on collectively? And I see that we have a lot of folks typing their responses in the document. We'll lift up some of those out loud in a moment. And I'm going to see also who has chimed in the chat box. Yes, so I see in the chat box folks lifting up some of the challenges around AI. Appreciate that. And I'm going to reshare the link to the document in the chat, just in case anyone still needs to get into it. All right, so as folks are typing in the chat and typing in the document, first, this question of feelings and thoughts that are coming up around this moment. I see folks naming fear, naming determination to turn things around, naming confusion, distress, a feeling of going backwards, horror and rage. And just want to validate that and invite us to sit with those feelings as we start this activity, and to pause for a moment and take a collective breath in and a collective breath out as we sit with and we name those feelings. In terms of challenges the peace movement faces due to the political environment that we're in, I see someone lifting up the military's pollution and the use of fossil fuels in war. I see folks lifting up challenges with building movements in a moment of deep polarization and division and deep entrenchment in the views of folks who support militarism. I see folks lifting up fear of repression, fear of deportation, disappearance, fascism. Does anyone else have anything they want to share about challenges the peace movement or other movements face in this moment due to the political environment that we're in? Before we move on from this question, anyone have a burning comment they want to share out loud or in the doc? And if not, I'll move us ahead. We can always keep adding to this document as we come back to it. Challenges.
Rebecca, you may not be able to see. I just wanted to point out that we did have one raised hand in Barbara Harrison.
Sorry, I missed that, Barbara. Go ahead.
Okay. For me, it's very important as a person that has worked in the single-payer healthcare movement for over a decade that progressives need to go outside of themselves and form relationships in communities that are different than themselves. And storytelling is a wonderful way to bring, to listen, of course, first, and then to give information to people and to have that back and forth. It's a level playing field. So that's my suggestion. No matter what movement, that's what I feel.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Barbara, and definitely agree with you. That's one of the biggest challenges our movements face in this moment, being able to grow and build outside of the people who, show up for a given meeting. We're already taking action on a given issue. And I invite you, Barbara, or anyone else who's able to add that to the document as well, so we can keep that in this tapestry we're building. Next question we want to reflect on tonight is what challenges exist inside the peace movement itself? Some of what I see being lifted up in the document is challenges coming together over priorities, challenges around a lack of a common, lack of a common agenda, around the inability to get folks to understand the work that we're doing, a lack of interest among activists in dealing with the growing militarism, challenges with bringing the peace movement together with climate change, together with other issues. Thank you, everyone, for sharing these. Does anyone else want to speak to challenges the peace movement or other movements face in terms of how we're organized, how we're structured, how we're coming together? All right, and if not, I will move us ahead. Last question on this activity is what sources of strength can we draw on collectively? I see folks naming their social circles, their friends, their relationships, spiritual traditions, a history of the tapestry of radical change makers throughout time that we are connected to, that we have learned from. Is someone raising a hand? Trying to speak? All right. Anyone else want to name some sources of strength that are helping us continue in this moment? Whether in the document or in the chat box. I would love to hear from one person on this before we close out. And yes, you can use the raise hand feature. All right. Anyone want to share what's keeping you going? What helped you find the energy to come to tonight's webinar?
Well, we've been in difficult situations before. I don't know if any is this difficult as this, but we've gone through them. We've eventually been able to win a lot of battles that looked pretty hopeless at the time.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Paul. And I personally really resonate with that. I feel like I find a lot of strength by remembering that movements have always faced down incredible obstacles and barriers unique to the time period that they're in, but perhaps just as daunting as what we face today. So moving on from this activity, I'm going to share just a little bit about Climate Mobilization Project's past and some of our reflections on the climate justice movement and some of the challenges that we share with the peace movement and with other movements. And Daisy, are you able to share the slides? Thank you. So our work today is rooted in us reflecting on some of the same challenges that we have just been discussing in this document that we've created together around the challenges that the peace movement faces in this moment. In terms of our history, we began as an organization really working to try to address the climate emergency and to catalyze a national response to decarbonize the US economy and society as quickly as possible. To sound the alarm about the climate emergency, we worked to pass emergency declarations in about 200 communities around the US. And these declarations were pledges by local governments to end greenhouse gas emissions as quickly as possible by 2025 or by 2030. After passing these declarations, these commitments, we worked with dozens of groups around the US, training them in community organizing, in policies, base building, and campaigns, and working with them to try to make these pledges, these commitments, a reality. Next slide, please. And worked with a network of groups around the US working to implement these policies. We've also worked with working class tenants, with transit riders, working to pass climate justice policies that also supported working families in several communities. And while doing that, while we had a lot of successes, we also encountered some really serious challenges rooted in some of the ways that the climate movement is organizing, right? And these are some of the same challenges that came up in the activity that we just did together. Next slide, please. Some of what we struggled with was this sense that the climate movement is grappling with an attack on so many fronts by right-wing forces. We are not just grappling with climate change, right? We are grappling with the results of hundreds of years of colonization and white supremacy. We're grappling with climate disasters, with inequality, with instability that's growing around the world, economic crises like inflation, and with rising right-wing movements that, as we're seeing now, are even taking away the ability to use tools like the governmental system that we have to create change. We found challenges in, how we were able to get local climate action to move, because we found that the climate movement was really struggling in a lot of ways to build the power that we need to make our demands a reality. A real disconnect between the amount of organized people that we have involved and the scale of the change that we're trying to make. And we also saw some of what was named in the activity that we just did together, right? An inability for the movement to connect with so many people. In terms of the climate movement, many climate organizations are focused on engaging a very narrow slice of Americans that is skewed by race, by class, by gender, and by age. And, we see some of that mirrored in what came up in the activity that we just did around the peace movement. And at the same time, we know there's so much energy around climate change and the climate crisis and addressing it. We have people out here sharing memes on Facebook, on Instagram, doing TikTok videos about how we're living in an era of apocalypse and how can we get a movement to tap into that. So we asked ourselves these questions, grappled with them, and that's some of what led us to where we are now. And I'm going to hand it over to Daisy to talk about our current strategy.
Yes, thank you, Rebecca. And so, yeah, and so the Climate Mobilization Project started conducting a series of interviews, really documenting and rounding up a lot of these sentiments. And we knew that the organization needed to take a pivot and find some way to fill in the gaps that our climate movement is facing. And that's kind of organizing around what we call climate survival, a framework for climate survival. And what this really entails is, understanding that because we don't have the base building power at this time to actualize the policies and the things that we actually want to change and manifest in this world at this moment, as we're experiencing a poly crisis, then we need to we've been talking a lot about depth in our organizing versus trying to build width of, it's not about how much we're reaching people. It's about how deep are we in the grassroots? How deep are we training up our people? And how are we actually building alternatives for us to move through crisis, to move through disaster, making sure that people have those skills and resources. And so for us to build alternative power, for us to find ways to divest from the system as much as possible. And that really entails, working significantly around leadership development. We really try to build the infrastructure to build survival programs in certain communities, which we'll get into in just a second with Rebecca, but really hone in on what does it mean to build alternatively. How are we trying to build up people's organizing skills to actually take on different fights in their neighborhoods? And this also gets into some campaign development, direct action organizing, understanding that the majority of the mass actions that we've been facing, that we've been seeing, especially post 2020, we're living in an era where we've got a lot of youth ignition. We have a lot of people that are really fired up about these things. We've been seeing the biggest mass protests since the 60s now. But something's still off. And so how can we, use these crises and use, different ways of power building and unsiloing from one another to really kind of build power that way. And also resource and infrastructure development. And so, really honing in on practical survival skills trainings, doing land-based skills trainings like, water catchment trainings, water filtration, cob building, these sorts of things for people to, take this theory and put it more into praxis and build something with their hands. And so that's kind of like where we are right now. And yeah.
So we are not done. We have a lot still to cover this evening. We are going to be getting in a moment into talking about what a survival program is and doing an interactive activity around how you can use some of these strategies in your own neighborhood, in your own organizations and coalitions. And then we'll talk about how to support the movement, finding your role and taking action with us. But we know that sometimes on these webinars, folks have to drop off. So we want to take a second and just preview the calls to action that we're going to be sharing tonight. after tonight's workshop, we are going to be emailing everyone one-on-one and invite you to reply to our follow-up email to get in conversation with us. We also have a series of links that we're sharing to some of our take-home tools. We have a climate survival toolkit that you can download, the Era of Climate Survival online course where you can learn more. And of course, we invite you to give to support this work at bit.ly/climate survival give. So with that, I will move on to our next section where we're going to be doing an interactive activity on survival programs. So a key part of our work is designing and piloting survival programs as a strategy for the climate justice movement, the peace movement, and other movements for justice to grow and to build power. A survival program comes to us from the work of the Black Panthers, the Young Lords, and other movements around the world and in the US, past and present. And it's a local project that helps people meet their basic needs. For example, needs for disaster preparedness, for food, for water, for care, while also helping our movements grow at the same time and directly bringing people into movements and into campaigns. Survival programs can build up leaders' resilience and build up the economic self-determination that our movements need in order to resist effectively. Next slide. So the way I just talked about survival programs, you might think, oh, they're a mutual aid project, or, oh, they're an outreach tool for our movements. And they can be both of those things. They're also a lot more when movements use them effectively. And rooted in the examples of the Black Panthers, the Young Lords, and other movements around the world, we've seen that survival programs build up the resources and time that leaders have to participate in building movements. We run a survival program that we're piloting in Richmond, Virginia, that provides food boxes and community space to working class young leaders in the anti-war and anti-genocide movements, in movements for climate resilience, for food sovereignty, and more. We also see that survival programs can grow movements' base of members and leaders by bringing people together to address an issue they face and problem solve around it collectively. And that survival programs have been used by movements around the world, in particular, to help meet people's needs and give them alternatives to participating in standard day-to-day production and consumption in the economy, helping our movements actually wield greater economic pressure during moments of peak escalation, mass protests, or mass strikes. And ultimately, we see ourselves and this work as part of the solidarity economy movement, right? Building towards viable alternatives to the corporate economic system that so many of us right now have no choice but to participate in. All right, next slide. So why now? We know that we are in this movement, this moment, in our movements and outside our movements, of so many crises that we face in our organizations and in the world around us. And we know that unless our movements shift how we're building power, how we're growing our membership, our leadership, and the strategies that we can use to escalate, things may not change. And so that was what pushed us as an organization to adopt this strategy a couple years ago at the end of 2022, start of 2023. Next slide. We also saw at that moment the path that we're on of declining democracy, decreasing faith in the political system's ability to create change, and also just our institutions becoming less and less responsive, becoming less and less democratic. We saw at that moment that massive economic pressure can be a really important tool for movements to wield in this context. And so began this process of developing, incubating, and supporting folks to launch survival programs as a strategy to build up movements that have the power to create change, even in moments when our institutions are failing us, as they have been in the United States for centuries and are so now more than ever failing us. Next slide. So I'm going to hand it over to Daisy to share a little bit about survival programs specifically that she is supporting and has helped folks design across Kentucky.
Yeah, thanks for that breakdown, Rebecca. I feel like when we talk about survival programs, I think it can get really oh my God, blast from the past, here we go again, sort of thing. But I think that this is really a significant shift and a kind of investment that we're making in community. And I think that it's really helping to ground people in their power and what they actually can control, and giving people the time to actually make time to be together and be in right relationship. As movement incubation coordinator at the Climate Mobilization Project, I have the lovely privilege of helping leaders and organizations build power and organize survival programs. I led a 6-month-long movement incubation program across the state of Kentucky, where we invited over 15 organizations and leaders across the state to get grounded in our climate survival framework and explore the possibility of, creating their own. And these are programs that are really trying to address issues and crises that Kentuckians experience every day, that get exacerbated when a disaster hits. Kentucky has been always in the news for flooding. We just had historic flooding, a couple of weeks ago, historic tornadoes. In 2021, we in Bowling Green did extensive disaster relief work around the Bowling Green tornadoes. And we experience a bunch of other things. We're one of the most polluted places in the US. Louisville specifically is one of the most segregated cities in the US. And we see this manifest in environmental pollution, bad soil health, all of these different things. And so leaders are coming together to create programs like a grow room, which is more of a cylindrical, vertical type of gardening project where we have a leader that is trying to work with STEM students and people in environmental engineering to create mobile kind of gardens to place in majority Black communities, communities that are facing food apartheid, and whatnot. We have some folks that are working on healing justice programs, combining mutual aid. We have some folks that are really trying to pilot some disaster preparedness work. And the essence of these programs are not only to help build an alternative, but to repoliticize people and to get them to understand why they're coming together to meet this particular need. And so, yeah, just really, really exciting work. Those leaders are continuing their development and finding resources and support to continue these programs in their community. So it's really cool.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing those specific examples, Daisy. And just to build on that, before we jump into our next interactive activity, We also work with a group of leaders I mentioned in Richmond, Virginia. I mentioned the Food Box and Community Space program there. And the group there is actually launching a water catchment testing and filtration training in response to a recent water crisis that Richmond has had, and is training young leaders across Richmond to become themselves trainers, teach their organizations, teach other community members water catchment and filtration skills as a way to activate people around this issue and to bring more community members into their organizations, and ultimately to build organizations that have the infrastructure to lead through crises, right? We know that in an age of crises, building power is not just about building up our membership and our leadership. It's also about having the infrastructure and the skills to respond during these moments of disaster and to provide people with really concrete solutions to these needs around survival. So, in terms of our work, we're doing this work locally, and then we're also sharing it with people around the US. So this workshop is one example of that. We also have other organizing guides and tools we're releasing this year. And we also expect later this year to launch a national cohort program that will bring this work to organizers all around the US. And as a tiny little taste of this work tonight, during our brief time together, we're going to start applying these ideas to your work in your communities, your neighborhoods, your organizations. And so we invite you to fill out this chart. And I'm going to put a link to the chart in the chat so that you can jump in and begin editing this document. And just as we did with the last activity, we're going to create a shared tapestry of ways that we can begin applying these ideas and these approaches to our communities or our organizations, right? Just to try them on. So the first column, we invite you to share what unmet needs are you or others in your community experiencing? And I'm going to share my screen. And invite you to just start typing and type away in response to that. In the second column, we invite you to share who might you be able to collaborate with to address this in your own community. In the third column, we invite you to share what are some things that we might be able to do together. And we encourage you to really think about both ways that you could address these challenges by putting pressure on decision makers, but also at the same time, ways that you could come together and address these issues among yourself without relying on concessions from people in power. Because we also know that there's a lot of reasons those campaign victories can be challenging to come by right now, and that we can start meeting these needs in an immediate way, even while we also take up those sort of more long-term campaigns. And in the fourth column, we invite you to think about how can doing this help build an organization or a movement? If we are distributing food, if we are helping people weatherize their buildings, if we are training people on disaster preparedness, what makes it, I think, a survival program is really about finding ways that it is bringing people into organizations, bringing people in to leadership roles, bringing people together to take action in their communities. So I see a lot of challenges coming up here that folks are brainstorming around: lack of affordable housing, food insecurity in local public housing and elsewhere, lack of health care, houselessness, Insecurity for immigrants and foreign students. Lack of housing. Lack of social connection. Ooh, people living in different worlds from each other. That could be a really rich thing to explore in a survival program. Yes, John.
This is a technological question. I would love to write some things, but I don't see how to get my mouse or whatever to get me to where I can write.
Interesting. So there is there's a Google document. I can put the
Yeah.
link in the chat again. If you copy and paste that link into your browser tab, it should open a document. And if you click in that document, you should be able to type. I do see people typing in there. It's set so that anyone can edit it.
Right. I tried to click on the document and I can see the document. I can see what other people have written, but I'm having trouble writing myself. And there may be other people with similar problems.
It might be, are you clicking on the Zoom screen or have you started a new tab in your browser? You need to be in like a web, you're in a new tab? All right. I'm so sorry about that, John.
All right.
I'd be happy to email you the link later. We'll actually send out the link for folks on this webinar. We'll send a wrap-up email with the link so that you can continue adding to it and take this document home after tonight's workshop has ended. So I see some really, really cool ideas coming up here. I see folks sharing work they're already doing that in some ways is similar to survival programs. And I'm curious. I see the person working on food insecurity in public housing. I would love to invite you, if you're willing, to raise your hand and share a little bit more about that work that you do and how it's going these days. Claire, is that you? Great, Claire. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that work?
Okay. So it started, as I noted in the document, in 2020, and it evolved. You know, for a while people were donating money, and we were able to get a few cards, you know, that people could go to the store and buy their own groceries. But then we realized a lot of people were being left out. So we started going to local markets where a lot of times local markets have food they can give away that it's close to date, but it's still good food. So we can get some of that donated food. And then we started collecting funds, sometimes through grants, to buy some of the food that people really like plantains and various things that are what the community liked. So it was a process of, you know, working. For a while, it was set up like we would bring the stuff and then they would go through it. But then we started, what was very positive was when we went the core of the community. There's a woman in particular who's been in that community for many years. They developed a group and they took on, like we would get the food to them, but they organized how it was distributed. They knew the people in the community who needed it the most. So it has been an evolving thing. Overall, it's been very positive for all of us because we've developed more of an understanding of each other. Yeah. I don't know if you have any specific questions, but.
Yeah, and some questions coming to mind for me, and I don't want to put you on the spot, so definitely don't feel like you have to answer, right? Are like, is there a way for that group that's currently distributing the food to build up autonomy to actually produce the food? Is there a way that they would want to connect folks like with an organization? Is there a way that this could develop into campaigns? So just thinking about this a little bit. Those are the sorts of things we look at in terms of survival programs, right? And sort of connecting these sorts of projects with organizations, with campaigns. And I'm curious, Daisy, if you have any thoughts you want to share on this or any of the other survival programs that we have coming up, or ideas we have coming up in this document.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just like I'm like a talker, and it's just nice to listen to others. Um but yeah, I I'm curious about the folks that are looking to kind of intervene municipally, via city, state council, because I feel like that is, I think, divergent of the kind of approach that we've been taking. But I'm curious about folks that are like, how are they thinking through that? And I think, how does that differ from, I think, what you may have already been doing? I'm just curious if there's anyone that was working around homelessness or lack of health care, or yeah, like the homeless kind of inquiries here. Anyone else to come off mute?
I may be missing it, but I'm not seeing anyone raise a hand. So
Me either.
it's also okay if you don't feel like speaking. But we are excited to continue this conversation. Looking at time, I think we may have time for one more idea. If anyone wants to workshop it, share a little bit about their thoughts on issues in their community, their neighborhood, organizational shifts that they may want to make, thinking through these ideas and these strategies. Anyone else want to share before we close out on this section?
Well, Daisy and Rebecca, I'd be interested in, on any one of these needs that are listed here, or problems we're dealing with, to kind of get a sense of the ways that your project might address some of these things. The problem we have is that because people live in different worlds from each other, people experiencing these particular crises are isolated. And others of us have somewhat comfortable lives. We're worried about the world and everything else, and trying to figure out how to address some of these crises that are listed here. And so join organizations and all that. But that's different from these survival projects that you're talking about. So I'd just be interested in hearing on any of these, whether it's homelessness or the healthcare crisis. I would think down south it's especially difficult with lack of rural hospitals and stuff like that. But just how might you tackle, apply the model that you are working on to any of these issues here?
That's a good point, Paul. Before I kind of try to take a stab at it, I did notice that John had their hand raised.
Good.
And I don't know if John wanted to maybe
So this is maybe a question for a big challenge, and maybe for our final interactive exercise, which has to do with, since many of us on this call are concerned equally about peace as well as climate, and it's great. It looks like a huge amount of what we talked about addresses local issues. That's very, very important. However, as we know, the military is a polluter in its own right, and morally speaking, it's utterly unacceptable. And yet, people don't easily get mobilized to address that. So one thing I just threw as an idea into this previous grid in the third column is maybe incorporate into organizing kind of study and action groups about militarism, particularly how it has local impacts. And maybe you folks in Kentucky or Richmond, Virginia, or other places have already done that kind of work. I'd be really curious to know about it.
Yeah, yeah, I can get into that. I'm also just before I take a good stab though, is there another John?
Oh, I'm
That
sorry. Yeah,
no, you're good. There's another John. Okay, there we go.
You may be talking about me.
Yes.
I put up that homelessness as an issue here in Southeast Alaska because summertime draws a lot of out-of-staters up here without jobs or anything like that, but expecting to be able to go to work, usually with tour companies or something like that. That oftentimes maybe they just end up homeless on the street. And I know that in Anchorage, which is not Southeast Alaska, but I know there they have a very big issue with encampments and stuff around town that's hurting residents, or maybe not hurting, but discomforting residents. In Juneau here in the Southeast, what we have is people living on sidewalks.
Man.
So it's an issue that housing for the unemployed, I guess, is a significant issue. And I expect that other than talking to cities and state assemblies and maybe rally, there's not much we can really do.
Yeah.
John, what happens to the homeless in the winter? And the winter is long in Alaska. I lived up by Denali for a summer, and it started snowing in September. So what do people
Well,
do in the winter?
they're talking maybe we still might get some snow yet this weekend, but um, that's the problem. I mean, there's warming shelters and stuff like that, but a lot of people who have not found a place to sleep or shelter uh, don't get to a shelter, don't get to a warming shelter or something like that. I don't know. It's definitely I recognize it as an issue, although I'm not that involved with it myself.
Do they treat people do a lot of the people who are homeless have mental health issues, or are they just, I shouldn't say just.
I'm so sorry. I just want
Sorry.
us to flag time, and I know we're gonna wrap up this section soon. So I want to move us forward to Daisy sharing their thoughts.
Rebecca, one thing that I filled out stuff on in my, I can't remember, my HTTP stuff. You have those responses. I don't need to hang on to them, do I? In my time.
Nope, you don't need to hang on to them. We'll be sending out the documents and the
Okay,
links.
okay.
Absolutely. Yep, we'll be sending them out to
All
everyone
right.
who
Thank
registered.
you very much. And thank you, John, for responding to me.
Yeah, go ahead, Daisy, and I have some thoughts I can share after that.
Yeah, no, I was really just I'm really picking up the vibe, and this is like a really overwhelming time. And yeah, I think that I'm under the type of radicalization that this system is designed to make me feel helpless and powerless. And that's the point of organizing for our survival, like I'm from New Orleans, y'all, and I went through Katrina, and I come from a long lineage and history of family that does not have any resources, that has a lot of health and mental health issues. And also, I think what we're really trying to hone in here is that with the trajectory of where our planet is and where we are together as a species, we are facing extinction, like literally. Our natural resources are drying up. we're going to kill each other and murder each other until that gets done. And that's going to be it, you know. And I don't like to just make blanket statements like that, but that is really what we're facing. And we don't have any time to which, you know, like we're really facing dire consequences right now. And so when I think of survival and building programs and projects, you know, when I'm asked, which I know John asked, or Paul asked, or somebody asked, you know, of like, based on what I'm seeing in my community, my approaches and what I would do, you know, like if there's, you know, like building security for immigrants, you know, and like refugees, you know, we're talking about people that are disappearing. We're talking about people that are being kidnapped. I see a lot of defense things of like, know your rights and, you know, tell people when they can or cannot like open the door. And, you know, that's really important. And also, you know, of like, you know, how can we protect those that are like being disappeared? You know, how can we do block watches or, you know, make sure that we're looking out for our people like that? You know, if you have wealth and you may have the resources or, you know, therapeutic skill sets to, you know, take care of people if they're going through like a health crisis or something like that, like build a co-op or, you know, build some place where you can actually house people, you know, like we really need to be taking these problems into our own hands. And our governments, like disasters, profit off of our demise. They profit off of us not having the things that we need day by day. That's why it's important for us to build these alternatives on our own, to give people options, to make people feel like they actually have power to go through these things. Because I mean, people are dying out here, you know, like Black and brown people are not okay, you know, poor people are not okay right now, trans people are not okay right now. And so that's the reality. Like I think there was more there that I wanted to say, but yeah, Rebecca.
Yeah, thanks for that, Daisy. For anyone who is working on immigration, we are not directly, but we want to share the great resource Defend and Recruit from Siembra, North Carolina that we've been circulating. They are national leaders in organizing these sorts of community ICE watches and have successfully driven ICE officers away multiple times. In terms of the work that we do, right? We have a program that addresses food distribution and access to fresh, healthy vegetables, and that has a built-in component of community building. And I want to really lift that up, right? This piece that came up about people living in different worlds, which I think was so well put, right? I think that for some of us, the challenges, as Daisy laid out, are around, you know, survival, around access to food, access to water. And I think that for a lot of us, the biggest challenge we face may be isolation. And if we can address that challenge of isolation, addressing these other material challenges and the challenge of building power all becomes so much easier, right? And so we see this piece of social isolation as a linchpin, right? Does that look like organizing people on your block? Does that look like creating a phone tree, creating a regular gathering space with people that you know already or people that you don't know yet, right? And that too can be a survival program. I think I heard some specific questions around food. So we talked about food. I mentioned our work, you know, doing water trainings. And I think also want to lift up that, you know, this framework of survival programs is really about people organizing together to meet needs that they too face, right? So this could look like, in addition to social isolation, this could look like childcare, this could look like elder care. Around housing, we've seen people and organizations organize community land trusts. We've seen people organize cooperatives, limited equity housing cooperatives, other types of cooperatives to provide that housing that is, below market rate, and connecting that with movements for and campaigns for housing justice more broadly. So these are just some models we can lift up to make sure to answer that question. But also, just holding that these specific areas where people might organize survival programs in are different by geography, by race, by class, by gender, by age, by identity. And we all have unmet needs in this society. And we all can find our place in a movement for survival. So on that note, I'm going to move us forward. And Daisy will share some thoughts with us on finding our role and roles that we can play.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I wanted to open up some space for genuine reflection, also kind of, thinking about some of the things that were coming up in our first brainstorm, about challenges that we're seeing and ways that we may want to intervene on them. I think that one of the most important things that climate survival is asking us to do in this moment is to really open up ourselves to a sense of self-responsibility, and find our autonomy again. And that means that we do have to, figure out what is our role? What do we feel like we can contribute, that we want to contribute, that is within our self-interest, that is within our collective interest, that broad. And I think especially, as a younger person, this looks different for me. I have like energy and like fire, and I train and I build, and I do all these different thof but maybe for some of the folks here on the call, maybe that looks different from you. And one of the things that I really love about this climate survival framework is that like mutual aid, everybody has something that they can contribute, whether you're able-bodied, whether you're white, you're black, you are, everyone has something to contribute. And it makes me think a lot about the fact, and I think someone brought it up in the initial brainstorm, is that there's also this problem around linking together the youth with our elders, and trying to find ways to kind of learn from one another and apply strategy and skill in our respective work. And so as we're talking about literally saving and preserving the planet, like even thinking about like, what wisdom do you guys think that I should have, thinking about contributions of, money or resources or goods, or, surpluses of things that you all may have, how can you share this and spread it, and, really break that isolationist kind of pattern that we're stuck in. And so, I wanted to just like open it up. Like, I don't know if this, hopefully this kind of workshop is think how like helping you think about, you know, more creative, more like innovative, more maybe radical ways of, you know, meeting this moment. And yeah, I'm just curious of like if there's any ways that you see supporting this.
I actually see some physical hands. You can unmute yourself. Kathy, why don't you go ahead? I see you waving.
Right. I've been wondering if a source of opportunity that we have right now is that the president of this country is so blatantly horrifying in so many ways. I know he still has millions of supporters, but he is putting us so close to the brink. We've been going there for time. I know the problem of the industrial complex, but we're being led by a sociopath. He causes problem.
I think we might have
Yeah.
lost you there for a
Yeah,
second, Kathy.
yeah, I was about to say I can't hear you anymore.
We're picking up parts of it, Cap, but not all of what you're
Yeah,
saying.
you trailed off there on us, Kathy.
Oh,
Can you
can I
stay
try
close
one
to
more
your,
time?
There you go. There you
Okay.
go. We just missed the very last bit of what you had to say.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure. I'm simply saying there is such recognition of how horrifying and crazy he is. He is hurting so many people, including people who have not usually been touched by the military industrial complex and the problems that poor people, black people, etc., have. I mean, I know people who are worrying about Social Security and Medicare and who aren't poor, but he's so crazy and so indiscriminating. I sort of feel like in groups like this, we should be looking at the things he's saying and doing and saying what groups are being hurt by this that aren't just the black people, people of color, the poor people, but who else is getting scared? Who is getting scared that maybe has some money, some time, some networks? It seems to me we have to find a way to take advantage of having this horrible, horrible leader doing the horrible things he's doing.
Mm.
Yeah. No, like everybody can catch these hands. It's impacting everyone. Yeah, and that's so important.
I was going to add that it's very critical that we go beyond the mainstream media to bring, this is part of the crux of the matter, to bring information, factual information to people, especially on the local level. I mean, Trump supporters, they're not getting the information that they need. And he's hurting them as well. The cuts to Medicaid and Medicare and even the federal government will impact them, and of course, as well as foreign governments. But we need to be out there talking with people that are different from ourselves and listening to what they're thinking. But we can't depend on the mainstream media to bring the information to people. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Does anyone else have their hand raised? I'm
Wait,
trying
I
to.
see Claire's finger. Claire, you can unmute yourself, you know.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to just jump in.
That's all right. Go ahead.
I think it's interesting because we live in all different parts of the country and in different environments. Like I live in Boston, and there's a tendency, in general, a lot of people they stick to their own, their own little place. And that started to break down. I mean, it's really been changing in the neighborhood where I live. So we've been more tuned in, particularly, I'm on a short block, not too far from a little downtown area that's not really built up. And it's been helpful because we've been going out and connecting more, just making sure people are okay and, developing a little more connections. So I think that's an important part too, so that people are freaking out because obviously, like I know a woman on my block who's a single mom, her husband died fairly young. She's got a boy who's 11 now and going through all kinds of changes, and she's feels totally overwhelmed. So it's important for her to have some support and just knowing that she doesn't have to deal with everything all by herself. So I just think that's one of the ways we support each other, in addition to doing, building up more opposition to the monster in chief.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, being a community bridge, showing up in solidarity. Love that.
I'm really resonating with this question that's come up a couple times, right? Of what is the people's safety net, right? What is our Social Security? What is our Medicare? What is our Medicaid? What is our answer to the non-existent, and not totally non-existent, but the minimal and increasingly threatened child care subsidies that folks have access to, and the lack of care in our society, and what does organizing that in the next few years look like as the system is dismantled, and just really resonating with that idea that folks have brought up, and also resonating with the question that I think John brought up, pointing out that everything that is a gap here is a gap because of military spending. Almost literally, no matter what we are organizing a survival program around, it can tie back to military spending. And, we work with a lot of anti-militarism organizers and have made that point, but it can also, doing this work can be an incredible tool to talk to people and have those conversations about military spending, just like John suggested. So yeah, really thinking about that and leaving with that idea, and grateful for that gift from this space.
Could I possibly follow up on that? Particularly with Daisy and Rebecca, I've heard of a really good technique called deep canvassing.
Yes.
And I believe it can maybe nicely accompany meeting very physical needs like food, healthcare, and so on. Maybe you folks do that. And if so, could you say a little bit about it?
Oh, do we? So, I actually lead my own survival program called the Community Scout Network. We were actually just out canvassing this week. But we work around community defense of, bridging this gap between the police state and militarism, and the direct connection to the climate crisis, and sort of using this kind of mutual aid, block by block kind of strategy to train our neighbors in our community in community defense and organizing in mutual aid, meeting our people on the porches and sitting with them, to work block by block of like what we need to build for ourselves to protect ourselves from disasters and like other threats in our community. And so it's definitely, we're within the CMP network, and it's really, it really actually started with like an obsession of mine post tornado, in Bowling Green in 2021. Of that was the method that we really had to use to contact people that actually maybe were like a block away from aid and still were not receiving aid, that had lost their jobs, that had like injuries, that they could not get sorted out, and doing that deep canvassing, deep kind of grassroots work at the doors to figure out those specific needs and how they coalesce to like a community issue. And so I really love to deep canvassing is like a really good kind of focus, and it seems like the majority of like I don't know, people just don't do it unless they need to do it for an election. You know, people like talking to people when you're not obligated to talk to them, you know, and look out for one another. But yeah, it kind of sort of gets into like the canvassing just turns into like authentic relationability, if that's not a word, relatability. Yeah.
Yeah, and for folks not familiar with community defense, it is a type of organizing that is really rooted in identifying issues, challenges, threats, and responding to them at the very grassroots level. Mutual aid disaster relief, which we work with and which played a leading role in Hurricane Helene relief and other grassroots disaster relief projects, has published a great community defense organizing guide that I've just put it in the chat. And that has a lot of other, great tools for thinking about survival programs you might develop and thinking about, doing this type of deep canvassing that Daisy mentioned. Yeah.
Do we have any other raised hands?
So you'll be sending us information by email then? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Barbara, over the next couple of days, you'll get an email with a recording of this program along with other resources that have been mentioned tonight.
Thank you, Paul.
So we'll get those from Daisy and Rebecca, the resources that they feel are most important to share with you.
This is so different from what MAPA usually does. It's a very different program.
Well, we really appreciate you coming out tonight and trying on these ideas with us, and also sharing with us what's going on in your communities. We are really excited to keep these conversations going one-on-one, and we're excited to talk individually with any of you that want to talk with us. So we will actually be sending you each an individual follow-up email to chat more and to build on some of the ideas that have come up tonight if you like, or just explore how else you might want to connect. We invite everyone here tonight to download the Climate Survival Toolkit, which has more activities like the interactive ones that we've done tonight, but that go deeper. Also readings, other ways to take action, activities you can do with groups or with your neighbors or on your own. And that's at bit.ly/climate survival toolkit. We also have an online course for those who want to dive even deeper and check out educational videos, other activities, ways to, engage with discussion and reflection questions online. That's at bit.ly/climate survival course. And then, our work is very unique. We are supported mostly by individual donors like you. And so we invite you to give to support this work so that we can connect more young leaders with this movement for survival, so that we can, launch our national cohort program this year and share this work with other communities and keep offering workshops like this one. to groups around the US. And to support that, you can give online at bit.ly/climate-survival-give.
Rebecca,
Yeah.
you'll be sending the link for the toolkit in the
Yeah.
email,
Yes.
so I don't have to worry about all this.
Yep, absolutely. So we are at time. I invite everyone here to close out and share in the chat. One thing you're taking away from tonight's webinar, just so that we can close out, seeing what is on folks' minds and hearts as we leave this space. And just, yeah, so grateful to continue chatting and excited to continue chatting with you all. Daisy, anything you want to add as we close out?
No, I'm just so happy and excited that y'all gave us space to talk about crazy stuff that you probably have. This is not this is not your regular programming. So thank you for welcoming us and trying on these ideas as Rebecca has mentioned. And I really, really hope to like talk to some of you guys again sometime soon. And that's what we're here for, like we really, really want to support people to like try new ideas, try new things. And we're here to support that. So
Is this that survival toolkit you're talking about? Which of these links take you to that? Is that
the first link? It's bit.ly/climate-survival-toolkit, and I will repaste that one individually in the chat box now, if you just give me like 10 seconds.
Okay, great.
Oops, sorry. All right, I have just pasted it in the chat.
Oh yeah. Okay, so this basically we order this and you send it to us?
It's a online form where you fill it out,
Yeah.
and then it immediately goes into your email inbox as soon as you fill out the form.
Okay, that's great.
Great.
Well, thank you, Rebecca and Daisy. Hopefully we'll be in touch as time goes on. Good luck with your work, and thanks to everyone who participated in our program tonight. If you found this helpful, you will be getting a link to the recording of this, and you can share it with other people that you think might benefit from it. And so I guess we're done for tonight. Good night, everyone, and let us carry on.
Good night, and thank you so much for the program.
thank
Bye.
y'all.
Good night.